The space around Kepler 442 burned with the light of dying ships. Captain Lisa Martinez stood on the bridge of her vessel, watching the battle through the main screen. Alien ships from 12 different species fought desperately against something that should not exist. The void swarm moved like liquid darkness across the stars, swallowing everything in its path. "Captain, we're getting the withdrawal order," said Lieutenant Jake Peterson from his station. His voice was steady, but Lisa could see his hands shaking as he read the message. Lisa nodded slowly. She had been expecting this. Admiral Jack Morrison had made his choice, and now every human ship in the sector would follow that choice. Around them, the great ships of the Galactic Federation continued their attack. The golden vessels of the Zephyrians fired their plasma weapons into the dark mass. The crystal ships of the Prism Collective sent beams of pure energy. The massive war. Cruisers of the Draconian Empire launched wave after wave of missiles. None of it was working. "Send the signal to all human ships," Lisa said. "Begin immediate withdrawal to Rally Point 7. Across the communication channels, alien voices erupted in anger and disbelief. The Zephyrian commander's voice came through clearly, speaking in the common galactic language that all species used. "The humans are retreating. They abandoned us in our darkest hour." Commander Kyle Thompson, aboard the human ship New Horizon, heard the same messages flooding his communication system. The alien species had many different names for what humans were doing. Cowards, betrayers, weaklings, Kyle had served alongside. These same aliens for 5 years? He had fought beside them, saved some of their lives, and watched them save human lives in return. Now they spoke of humans like they were diseased animals. "Sir, the Andromedan fleet is moving to block our exit." "Route," reported Ensign Betty Collins from the navigation station. Kyle looked at the tactical display. 3 Andromedan cruisers had indeed moved to prevent the human ships from leaving. Their blue hulls gleamed with weapon energy as they powered up their systems. "Open a channel to the Andromedan commander," Kyle ordered. The face of Admiral Vexstar appeared on the screen. His pale blue skin was marked with the ritual scars that showed his rank. His large black eyes held nothing but contempt. "Commander Thompson, you will return your ships to the battle line immediately. The Federation Council has not authorized any human withdrawal." Kyle kept his voice calm. "Admiral, our orders come directly from Admiral Morrison. We are exercising our right as an independent member species to redeploy our forces." "Redeploy?" Vexstar's voice rose. "You flee like frightened children while brave beings die. This is why humans should never have been admitted to the Federation. You lack the courage for real war." The channel closed before Kyle could respond. He watched as the Andromedan ships moved closer, their weapons now fully charged. For a moment, Kyle wondered if he would have to fire on former allies to escape. Then new orders came from Admiral Morrison himself. "All human ships, execute emergency jump immediately. Override all safety protocols." The quantum tunnels opened like wounds in space. One by one, human ships disappeared into the swirling energy. Gates. The aliens were left behind to face the void swarm alone, back on the Federation command ship. The remaining alien leaders watched in stunned silence as every human vessel vanished within minutes. General Krickstall of the Zephyrians slammed his clawed hand against the tactical table. "They have doomed us all," he snarled. "Human ships made up 30% of our fleet strength. Without them, we cannot hold the line." Admiral Vexstar nodded. Grimly, "I always suspected humans were weak. Their planet is too comfortable, their lives too easy. They have never faced true extinction like the rest of us. What none of them knew was that light years away, in a hidden system beyond the galaxies." Edge, Dr. Helen Garcia was working frantically in her laboratory. She had barely slept in weeks, surviving on stimulants and sheer determination. Around her, hundreds of scientists and engineers worked on the most dangerous project in human history. "Doctor, the latest test results are ready," said her assistant. Dr. Peter Shangdot Helen looked at the data scrolling across her screen. The numbers were better than she had hoped, but still not good enough. "Not yet," She rubbed her tired eyes and looked out the laboratory window at the massive construction happening on the planet's surface. Huge machines were building something that looked like a combination of a research facility and a military base. "How long until the next batch of volunteers arrives?" she asked. 2 days, Doctor. Admiral Morrison is sending another 100 people. Helen felt sick, 100 more people who might die in her experiments. But if her theory was correct, those deaths might save trillions of lives across the galaxy. She had discovered something in human brain structure that was different from every other known species. It was a tiny difference, barely noticeable, but it might be the key to fighting the Void. The Void Swarm was not just a physical enemy. It was something that existed partly outside normal reality. It affected the minds of every creature it encountered, driving them insane or turning them into empty shells. But human brains showed a unique resistance to this effect. Not complete resistance, but enough that humans could function longer in void-corrupted areas than any other species. Helen had been studying this for months before the war reached its current desperate state. She had tried to present her findings to the Federation Science Council, but they had dismissed her work. The other species considered humans primitive. They could not believe that humans might have any advantage over more advanced races. Now, Admiral Morrison was betting everything on Helen's research. Every human ship in the galaxy was racing toward their hidden system. Every human colony was being evacuated. If Helen was wrong, humanity would die as isolated refugees. If she was right, they might become something that could actually fight the Void and win. Meanwhile, back at Kepler 442, the battle was going badly. Without human ships to fill the gaps in their formation, the alien fleets were being pushed back. The Void Swarm flowed around their defenses like water, surrounding and destroying ships faster than the aliens could retreat. Captain Zorak of the Draconian Empire watched his people's greatest warship get swallowed by the dark mass. The ship's crew had been veterans of a dozen wars. Now they were gone, consumed by something that turned living beings into empty husks. "All ships, fall back to defensive line Beta," he ordered, but he knew it was hopeless. Without the humans, they simply did not have enough firepower to stop the swarm on distant Earth. News reports showed the alien reaction to humanity's withdrawal. The reporters from other species called it the greatest betrayal in galactic history. They said humans had revealed their true nature at last. Some predicted that humanity would be expelled from the Federation entirely, but in the hidden system, Admiral Morrison stood in his command center and watched the last human transport ships arrive. Every human in the galaxy was now in this one system, protected by the greatest secret in their species' history. Around him, officers worked to coordinate the massive project that Dr. Garcia was leading. "Sir, we're receiving distress signals from the Federation fleets," reported Captain Don Walsh. "The Prism Collective is requesting immediate assistance. They say their home system is under attack." Morrison closed his eyes for a moment. Good people were dying while humanity hid in the darkness. Allies who had fought beside human soldiers were being destroyed by an enemy that seemed unstoppable. Part of him wanted to send ships back to help, to prove that humans were not cowards, but he knew the truth. Conventional weapons could not stop. The Void Swarm, the other species, had tried everything they had, and they were losing. If humanity was going to help, they had to become something different first. Something that could survive contact with the Void and fight it on its own terms. "Send a message to all human personnel," Morrison said. "Tell them that our retreat is not permanent. Tell them that we will return, and when we do, we will end this war." He did not add what he knew to be true. When humans returned to the war, many of them would no longer be fully human. The price of victory would be higher than anyone could imagine. 6 months had passed since the human retreat from Kepler 442. The galaxy burned with news of the Federation's losses. 3 more star systems had fallen to the Void Swarm. The crystal beings of the Prism Collective had lost their homeworld. The proud Draconian Empire was fighting for its capital system. Yet no one had seen a single human ship since the withdrawal. Captain Ryan Bennett stood on the observation deck of the construction platform, watching massive machines work on the surface of the dead planet below. The world had no name in any galactic database. It existed in a system so far beyond the galaxy's edge that its stars were barely visible points of light. Here, hidden in the cosmic darkness, humanity was building something that would have horrified their former allies. "The next batch of installations will be ready tomorrow," said engineer Paul Watson, joining Ryan at the viewing window. Paul's uniform was stained with grease and metal dust. He had been working for 18 hours straight like most of the construction teams. Ryan nodded, watching the robotic builders create another facility on the planet's surface. Each building looked the same from outside, a simple metal structure about the size of a city block. But Ryan knew what was inside them: laboratories, medical facilities, and chambers designed for experiments that no ethical committee would ever approve. "How many volunteers are we expecting for the next round?" Ryan asked. Paul checked his tablet. 250. Dr. Garcia says we need at least 1,000 successful subjects before we can consider the first phase complete. Ryan felt his stomach tighten. Successful subjects. That was the polite way of saying people who survived what Dr. Garcia was doing to them. The failure rate was still over 60%. Out of every 10 volunteers who entered the enhancement chambers, 6 never came out alive. Lieutenant Amy Stevens was coordinating the arrival of another transport ship in the system's main asteroid base. The ship carried civilians from the Tau Ceti colony, families with children, elderly people, and workers who had spent their entire lives in peaceful occupations. All of them had volunteered to leave everything behind when Admiral Morrison sent out the evacuation orders. "Docking Bay 7 is ready for the transport," reported Sergeant Mike Johnson from the traffic control station. Amy watched the ship maneuver carefully through the asteroid field that hid their base. The rocks had been hollowed out and connected by tunnels, creating a hidden city that could house millions of people. It was here that most of humanity now lived, waiting to see if Dr. Garcia's project would save them or destroy them. The transport docked, and Amy went to meet the new arrivals. She saw the fear in their faces as they looked around the military base. These people had lived normal lives until 6 months ago. They had worked in offices, taught in schools, and raised families. Now they were refugees hiding at the edge of known space while their species prepared for something unthinkable. "Welcome to Haven Base," Amy told the group. She had given this speech hundreds of times, but it never got easier. "You will be assigned quarters in Section C tomorrow. You will receive briefings about our situation and the volunteer program." An older woman raised her hand. "Lieutenant, is it true what they're saying? The Federation has branded us as traitors?" Amy nodded. "The Federation Council has voted to expel humanity from the Alliance." "They believe we abandoned our duty," a younger man spoke up. "What about our colonies that stayed behind? What happened to them?" Amy had been dreading this question. "The colonies that refused evacuation have been occupied by Federation peacekeeping forces. Our people there are being held as prisoners of war." The crowd murmured angrily. These people had friends and family members who had chosen to stay behind, believing that the Federation would protect them. Instead, they had become hostages to ensure that humanity could not return to the war without consequences. Deep in the research complex, Dr. Helen Garcia worked in her private laboratory. She had not left the facility in 3 weeks. Her assistant, Dr. Maria Santos, brought her meals and forced her to sleep when exhaustion made her collapse at her workstation. "The neural mapping is complete on Subject 174, Maria reported, handing Helen a data tablet. Helen studied the brain scans of their latest volunteer. The enhancement process was working, but the changes it made to human consciousness were disturbing. The volunteers who survived gained the ability to resist void influence, but they also lost something essentially human. They became colder, more distant, as if the part of their brain that created emotional connections had been damaged." "How long does Subject 174 have?" Helen asked. "Based on previous patterns, maybe 2 years. The enhanced neural pathways burn out eventually. The brain cannot sustain the changes indefinitely." Helen closed her eyes. 2 years? That was better than the early subjects who had died within months. But it meant that every person who underwent the enhancement process was essentially volunteering to die for the chance to fight the void. "Doctor, there's something else," Maria said carefully. "The volunteers are starting to form groups. They don't interact much with unenhanced humans anymore. It's like they see us as different species." Helen had noticed this too. The enhanced humans seemed to communicate with each other in ways that normal humans could not understand. They would look at each other and somehow share thoughts without speaking. It was useful for military coordination, but it also meant they were becoming isolated from the rest of humanity. Meanwhile, in the asteroid base's communication center, Admiral Morrison received daily reports from the war zone. The news was universally bad. The Andromedans had lost 3 more fleets. The Zephyrians were abandoning their outer colonies. The Federation was falling apart as each species focused on protecting their own territory instead of working together. "Sir, we're receiving another message from the Federation Council," reported Communications Officer Lisa Hayes. "They're demanding that we return to assist with the evacuation of the Centaurus colonies." Morrison read the message on his personal screen. The tone was different from the earlier communications. 6 months ago, the Federation had called humans cowards and traitors. Now they were begging for help. The reality of fighting the void without human assistance had clearly been harder than they expected. "Send the standard response," Morrison ordered. "Tell them that humanity is currently unable to provide military assistance." He did not mention the real reason for the delay. Dr. Garcia's project was reaching a critical phase, but it was not ready yet. The enhanced humans could resist void influence better than any other known beings, but they still died too quickly. If Morrison sent them into battle now, humanity's sacrifice would be wasted. They would die heroically, but they would not be able to win the war. In the training facilities on the planet's surface, the first generation of enhanced humans was learning how to fight. Lieutenant Nicole Brown led a squadron of enhanced pilots through simulation exercises. These men and women could fly ships into void-corrupted space without losing their minds, something no other species could do. "Brown, your formation is too tight," called out the training instructor, Colonel Frank Davis. "Enhanced humans don't need visual contact to coordinate. Use the neural link." Nicole focused on the strange new sense that connected her to the other pilots. She could feel their thoughts and intentions as clearly as her own. It was useful in combat, but it also made her feel disconnected from normal humans. When she looked at unenhanced people now, they seemed slow and limited, like children trying to understand adult conversations. The enhanced pilots flew their simulated ships through a recreation of void space. The simulation was based on data from the real battles, showing the kind of environment they would face when they finally entered the war. Normal pilots would have been driven insane within minutes by the chaotic energy patterns. The enhanced humans felt discomfort, but they could function. Sergeant Tony Miller trained ground forces who would fight on void-corrupted planets. These soldiers could walk through radiation fields that would kill normal humans. They could resist the mental attacks that the void used to turn people into mindless servants. But like all enhanced humans, they knew they were living on borrowed time. "Remember, you're not trying to survive," Tony told his trainees. "You're trying to complete the mission before your enhancements burn out. Every day you live is a gift, and every enemy you kill is a victory for humanity." The enhanced soldiers nodded. They understood their fate better than anyone. They had volunteered to become weapons against the void, knowing that the process would eventually kill them. But they also knew that their sacrifice might save trillions of lives across the galaxy. As the months passed, the hidden human facilities produced more enhanced soldiers. Each batch was better than the last as Dr. Garcia refined her procedures. But the ethical cost was enormous. Humanity was creating a subspecies of people designed to die in battle against an enemy that conventional forces could not fight. Admiral Morrison stood in his command center, watching reports from across the galaxy. The Federation was losing the war. Soon they would face complete defeat unless something changed. The enhanced humans were nearly ready, but Morrison knew that deploying them would mark the end of humanity as they had known it. The medical bay in the research facility was filled with the sound of machines keeping people alive. Dr. Helen Garcia walked between the beds, checking on the latest group of volunteers. Some were unconscious, their bodies fighting to accept the changes being made to their nervous systems. Others stared at the ceiling with eyes that seemed to see things that were not there. "We lost 3 more overnight," Dr. Maria Santos reported quietly. "The neural pathways couldn't handle the stress. Their brains just stopped working." Helen nodded, making notes on her tablet. 3 more deaths out of 20 volunteers. The survival rate was improving, but every failure meant someone's child, spouse, or parent would never come home. She had started this project to save humanity. Now she wondered if she was destroying it instead. "What about the survivors?" Helen asked. "They're adapting well?" "Their resistance to void influence is stronger than any previous group. But Doctor, the psychological changes are getting worse." Helen looked at the survivors sitting in the recovery area. They did not talk to each other or to the medical staff. They just sat quietly, staring at nothing, as if they were listening to sounds that no one else could hear. When she approached them, they looked at her with expressions that were polite but distant, like adults being patient with a confused child. "How do you feel?" Helen asked one of them, a young man named Gary Peterson, who had been a teacher before volunteering. "I feel functional," Gary replied. His voice was calm and empty of emotion. "The connections are clear now. The purpose is obvious." "What purpose?" Helen asked. Gary looked at her with eyes that seemed much older than his 28 years. "To stop the void, to protect the unenhanced, to fulfill the mission." Helen felt a chill. Gary had been a warm, friendly person before the enhancement. He had volunteered because he wanted to help save his students and their families. Now he spoke like a machine programmed for war. Captain Daniel Parker stood in the briefing room, addressing the first complete unit of enhanced soldiers. 50 men and women sat in perfect rows, their faces showing no expression as he explained their first training mission. These were people who had been farmers, mechanics, office workers, and parents just months ago. Now they were humanity's deadliest weapons. "The simulation will recreate conditions on a void-corrupted planet," Daniel explained. "Normal humans would die within minutes of exposure. You will need to complete objectives while dealing with environmental hazards and void creatures." The enhanced soldiers nodded in unison. They did not ask questions or show any signs of nervousness. Daniel had been enhanced himself 3 months ago, and he understood their mindset. Fear was still there, but it was buried under layers of cold purpose. The enhancement process did not make people braver. It made them unable to care about their own survival in the same way. "Sir, what about casualties?" asked Sergeant Carol Wright, one of the enhanced soldiers. "Complete the mission," Daniel replied. "Individual survival is secondary to objective achievement." The enhanced soldiers accepted this without reaction. An unenhanced human unit would have shown some concern about being ordered to ignore their own safety. The enhanced humans simply processed it as another piece of tactical information. Meanwhile, in the asteroid base, Lieutenant Amy Stevens was dealing with a growing problem among the unenhanced human population. People were starting to ask difficult questions about the volunteer program. Families wanted to know what was happening to their loved ones who had entered the enhancement process. "My wife volunteered 6 weeks ago," said Robert Kim, a middle-aged engineer from the Mars colonies. "I've been told she's alive, but I haven't been allowed to see her. What are you people doing to her?" Amy had heard this question dozens of times. The enhanced humans were kept separate from the general population for good reasons. Their behavior was disturbing to normal humans, and their presence seemed to make unenhanced people feel inadequate and confused. "Your wife is part of a classified military program," Amy explained. "She's safe, but the nature of her assignment requires isolation during training." "Training for what?" Robert demanded. "What kind of training takes 2 months without any contact with family?" Amy could not tell him the truth. Robert's wife, Jenny, had been one of the successful enhancement subjects, but she was no longer the woman he had married. The Jenny Kim who had volunteered was warm, caring, and devoted to her family. The enhanced Jenny Kim was a highly efficient soldier who spoke about her husband and children as if they were distant acquaintances she had once known. In the communication center, Admiral Morrison received another desperate message from the Federation. The Draconian Empire had fallen completely. Their homeworld was now a dead rock covered in void corruption. The surviving Draconians were scattered across refugee ships, fleeing toward the galaxy's core systems. "Admiral, the Federation is offering full amnesty for our withdrawal," reported Communications Officer Lisa Hayes. "They're also offering to make Admiral Morrison the supreme commander of all Federation forces if we return immediately." Morrison almost laughed. 6 months ago, these same people had called humans cowards and traitors. Now they were offering him control of their entire military. The desperation in their messages was obvious. They were losing the war so badly that they were willing to put their former enemies in charge. "What's our current readiness status?" Morrison asked his staff. Colonel Frank Davis consulted his reports. "We have approximately 800 enhanced soldiers ready for deployment. Dr. Garcia estimates we could have another 1,000 within 3 months. And their life expectancy? Current projections show an average of 18 months from enhancement to death. The neural modifications are stable for about a year, then begin to break down rapidly." Morrison considered the numbers. 800 enhanced soldiers might be enough to change the course of a battle, but probably not enough to win the war. If he waited for more volunteers to complete the process, the Federation might collapse entirely before humanity could return. To help, Dr. Garcia entered the command center looking exhausted. She had been working for 20 hours straight, trying to solve the problem of enhancement burnout. The volunteers were willing to die for the cause, but their deaths needed to count for something. "Admiral, I need to speak with you privately," she said. They went to Morrison's office, where Helen collapsed into a chair. Her hands were shaking from fatigue and stress. "I think I've found a way to extend the lifespan of enhanced humans," she said, "but it requires a procedure that's even more dangerous than the original enhancement." "How much more dangerous?" Morrison asked. 90% mortality rate. Out of every 10 enhanced humans who undergo the secondary process, 9 will die immediately. But the survivor will be able to function for years instead of months. Morrison felt sick. They were already asking people to sacrifice their humanity and their lives. Now Helen was suggesting they gamble with the lives of their existing enhanced soldiers for a chance at longer survival. "There's something else," Helen continued. "The secondary enhancement appears to be permanent. The neural changes become so deep that they can't be reversed. Anyone who survives the process will never be human again in any meaningful sense." "What do you mean?" "They lose the ability to feel emotions the way we do. They can't form personal relationships. They become completely focused on whatever mission they're given. They're still intelligent, but they're not really people anymore." Morrison walked to his window, looking out at the construction happening on the planet below. Thousands of people were working to build weapons and facilities for a war that might destroy their species' soul even if it saved their lives. "How many volunteers do we have for the secondary enhancement?" he asked. "All of them," Helen replied. I explained the risks to the enhanced soldiers, and every single one volunteered immediately. They don't seem to care about the danger, too, themselves. "Because they're already not fully human," Morrison said quietly. "Yes, the first enhancement changes them enough that they see their own survival as less important than completing their mission. They want to undergo the secondary process because it will make them more effective weapons." Morrison made his decision. The Federation was dying, and conventional weapons could not stop the Void Swarm. If humanity was going to make a difference, they needed soldiers who could survive long enough to matter. "Begin the secondary enhancement process," he ordered. "Select the most stable subjects first." Helen nodded and left to prepare for procedures that would either create humanity's salvation or complete its transformation into something unrecognizable. Outside, the hidden human civilization continued its work, unaware that their species was about to cross a line that could never be uncrossed. The enhanced humans began their secondary modifications, knowing that most of them would die and that the survivors would become something that could barely be called human. But they also knew that the galaxy was dying, and someone had to be willing to pay the ultimate price to save it. The alarm screaming through the Federation command ship could be heard across 3 decks. Admiral Vextar of the Andromedans stood in the center of the bridge, watching his tactical display show the collapse of everything he had spent his life defending. The Void Swarm had broken through the last major defensive line at Centaurus Prime. In 6 hours, the heart of Federation space would be under attack. "Sir, we're receiving multiple distress signals from the civilian evacuation fleets," reported his communications officer. "The Void has surrounded the Rigel system. Over 2 billion people are trapped." Vextar closed his eyes. 2 billion souls who would be dead or worse within days. The Void did not simply kill its victims. It turned them into empty shells that served its hunger. Every person consumed became another weapon in the Swarm's endless army. "Any word from the Emergency Council?" he asked. "The Zephyrian government has voted to surrender. They're offering to serve the Void in exchange for the survival of their species. The Prism Collective has gone silent. We think their entire leadership is dead." Vextar looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These were good people who had served the Federation faithfully for years. Now they were facing the end of everything they had fought to protect. The great alliance of species that had brought peace to the galaxy was dying, and there was nothing left to do but watch. Then the impossible happened. "Sir, we're detecting quantum tunnel signatures," called out the sensor operator. "Multiple contacts emerging from hyperspace." On the main screen, space began to ripple and tear. Quantum tunnels opened like doorways between dimensions, and ships began to emerge. But these were not the familiar designs of any Federation species. The vessels were sleek and black, with markings that Vextar had not seen in 2 years. "Those are human ships," whispered General Crixtal of the Zephyrians. "But that's impossible. We destroyed their military records when we expelled them from the Federation." More ships kept coming. Dozens, then hundreds of human vessels poured out of the quantum tunnels. But something was different about them. The designs were more advanced than anything humans had possessed before their retreat. The energy signatures were strange. Almost alien. Captain Daniel Parker stood on the bridge of the human flagship Defiance, watching the Federation forces on his display. His enhanced senses could detect the fear and confusion of the alien crews even across the vacuum of space. These people had spent 2 years believing that humans were cowards who had abandoned them. Now they were about to learn the truth. "Captain, we're receiving communications from the Federation command ship," reported Lieutenant Steve Adams. "Admiral Vextar is requesting immediate contact." Daniel nodded. His enhanced mind processed thousands of tactical possibilities in seconds. The Federation forces were positioned poorly for defense. Their ships were damaged and low on supplies. Without human intervention, they would be destroyed within hours. "Open the channel," Daniel ordered. Admiral Vextar's face appeared on the screen. The Andromedan's expression was a mixture of hope, suspicion, and desperate relief. "Captain Parker, I don't know how you found us, but we need immediate assistance. The Void Swarm will reach our position in less than 6 hours." Daniel studied the alien commander with eyes that saw more than they once had. His enhanced perception could read micro-expressions and body language with perfect accuracy. Vextar was telling the truth about the situation, but he was also calculating how to use human ships without acknowledging his previous mistakes. "Admiral, 2 years ago you called humans cowards and expelled us from the Federation," Daniel said calmly. "You refused our offers of assistance and blocked our withdrawal from combat zones. Why should we risk our lives for people who abandoned us?" Vextar's blue skin darkened with embarrassment. "Captain, we were wrong. We acted in anger and fear. But millions of innocent people will die if we don't work together. Innocent people have been dying for 2 years while you fought this war without us." Daniel replied. Why is their survival suddenly our responsibility? The truth was that Daniel and his enhanced soldiers had already decided to fight. Their modifications made them incapable of ignoring the suffering of others, even former enemies. But the Federation needed to understand that their relationship with humanity had changed forever. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Nicole Brown was leading her squadron of enhanced pilots toward the edge of void-corrupted space. These pilots could fly ships directly into areas that would drive normal humans insane. Their enhanced minds could resist the mental attacks that the void used to disable enemy vessels. Brown, are you reading the energy patterns ahead? Asked Captain Jerry Foster over the communication link. Nicole studied her instruments. The readings showed levels of void corruption that should have been impossible. The space ahead was filled with dark energy that twisted reality itself. No normal human could survive exposure to such conditions. I'm reading it, Foster. Corruption levels are off the charts. This is going to be rough. Can your people handle it? Nicole felt the neural links connecting her to the other enhanced pilots. Through those connections, she could sense their readiness and determination. They were afraid, but fear no longer controlled them the way it once had. We can handle it, she said. The human ships entered the corrupted zone, and immediately their instruments began showing impossible readings. Space itself seemed to bend and twist around them. Energy patterns that should not exist danced across their screens. But the enhanced pilots continued flying with steady hands and clear minds. Behind them, the Federation ships tried to follow but were forced to stop at the edge of the corruption field. Their crews began showing signs of mental breakdown within minutes of exposure. How are the humans doing that? General Krickstall asked over the communication channel. Our best pilots can't even look at those energy readings without losing their minds. Admiral Vexstar watched the human ships disappear into the dark energy cloud. I don't know, but they've changed somehow. Those ships are flying in conditions that should be impossible to survive. On the surface of a void-corrupted planet, Sergeant Tony Miller led his enhanced ground forces through terrain that looked like something from a nightmare. The soil was black and moved like liquid. The air shimmered with energy that made normal humans hallucinate and lose consciousness. Strange creatures made of dark matter stalked between twisted trees that grew in impossible directions. Miller, we're detecting the Federation research station about 2 kilometers ahead, reported Corporal Bob Martinez through the neural link that connected the enhanced soldiers. Tony could sense the location through his modified nervous system. The research station contained data that might help develop better weapons against the void. Normal rescue teams had tried to reach it for months, but none had survived the corrupted environment. Martinez, take your team around the eastern approach. Williams, cover the western flank. We go in fast and get out faster. The enhanced soldiers moved through the nightmare landscape with careful precision. They could feel the void energy trying to invade their minds, but their modifications held. The whispers that drove normal humans insane were just background noise to them. They reached the research station and found 17 Federation scientists huddled in the basement. The alien researchers were barely alive, their minds damaged by months of exposure to void corruption. Please, whispered Dr. Torgan, a Zephyrian physicist, the data must be saved. We discovered something important about the void's true nature. Tony helped the scientist to his feet. We'll get you out of here, Doctor, all of you. But the corruption field, Dr. Torgan said weakly. Your people will die trying to carry us through it. Tony looked at the terrified alien scientist with enhanced eyes that saw too much. Doctor, we're not the same humans you remember. We can survive things that would kill normal people. As the enhanced soldiers carried the rescued scientists through the corrupted landscape, Dr. Torgan began to understand that something fundamental had changed about humanity. These soldiers moved through deadly energy fields without showing any signs of distress. They communicated without speaking and seemed to know things they could not possibly know back in space. The Federation commanders watched in amazement as human ships emerged from the void corruption carrying rescued crews and vital intelligence data. Captain Daniel Parker's voice came over the communication channel. Admiral Vexstar, we've recovered your people and the research data, but you need to understand something. We're not the same humans who left 2 years ago. What do you mean? Vexstar asked. We had to become something else to fight the void, something that could survive contact with it and hurt it back. The people who are saving you today paid a price you can't imagine. Dr. Helen Garcia, monitoring the mission from the hidden human base, watched the vital signs of the enhanced soldiers. Their neural patterns showed stress levels that should have been fatal, the modifications that allowed them to function in void-corrupted environments were burning out their nervous systems faster than expected. Admiral Morrison, we're losing people faster than projected, she reported. The enhanced soldiers are dying from the strain of extended exposure to void energy. Morrison watched the tactical display showing human ships scattered across the battle zone. The galaxy's core burned with unnatural light as Admiral Morrison led the combined human and Federation fleets toward the source of all their nightmares. The massive tier in space hung before them like a wound in reality itself. Through it, they could see the writhing darkness that was the true form of the void swarm. This was where it all began, and where it had to end. Admiral, the corruption readings are beyond anything we've recorded, reported Captain Daniel Parker from his ship. His enhanced senses could feel the wrongness pouring from the dimensional tier. Normal humans won't be able to get within 1,000 kilometers of that thing. Morrison looked at the tactical display showing their fleet. 800 enhanced human soldiers spread across 50 ships. Behind them, the surviving Federation forces waited at a safe distance. The aliens could provide fire support, but they could not approach the source of the void without losing their minds. Parker, what's the status of your people? Daniel checked, the neural links connecting him to the other enhanced soldiers. What he felt made his heart heavy. Sir, we're all dying. The exposure to this level of void energy is burning out our modifications faster than expected. We have maybe 6 hours before total system failure. Understood, Dr. Garcia. Are you ready? Dr. Helen Garcia sat in the command center of the research ship, her hands trembling as she prepared to activate the device that would end everything. Around her, the last unenhanced humans worked frantically to complete the final preparations. The machine she had built was both humanity's greatest achievement and its most terrible weapon. Admiral, the consciousness amplifier is ready, she reported. But once I activate it, there's no going back. Every enhanced human will be connected to the network. Their individual consciousness will be absorbed into a collective mind designed to seal the dimensional tier. Morrison closed his eyes. He was about to order the complete extinction of the enhanced human subspecies. These people had volunteered to become something inhuman to save the galaxy. Now they would volunteer to cease existing as individuals to complete their mission. Send the activation signal to all enhanced personnel. He ordered throughout the human fleet. Enhanced soldiers felt the network come online. Lieutenant Nicole Brown was leading her pilots toward the dimensional tier when the connection hit. Suddenly she could feel the thoughts and memories of every other enhanced human. 800 minds became one vast consciousness focused on a single purpose. I can feel all of you, she said over the communication channel, her voice filled with wonder and sadness. We're not alone anymore. Sergeant Tony Miller, fighting void creatures on a corrupted space station, felt the same connection. The loneliness that had plagued enhanced humans since their modification disappeared as he became part of something larger. But he also understood what this meant. This is goodbye, he said to his unenhanced support team. Tell our families we chose this willingly. Captain Daniel Parker felt his individual identity beginning to merge with the collective consciousness. The Daniel Parker who had been a teacher, a husband, and a father was fading away. What remained was pure purpose, focused entirely on stopping the void. All enhanced personnel, begin final approach, he ordered. Though the distinction between his voice and the collective voice was becoming unclear, the enhanced humans flew their ships directly into the dimensional tier. The space around them twisted and writhed as reality broke down. Their instruments failed completely. But their modified minds could navigate by sensing the flow of void energy itself. Dr. Garcia watched her screens as the enhanced soldiers approached the tier's center. Admiral, the network is holding. The collective consciousness is stronger than we hoped. But the individual personalities are dissolving faster than projected. Morrison watched good people sacrifice not just their lives, but their very selves to save a galaxy that had called them cowards. How long until the seal is complete? The enhanced soldiers need to position themselves at specific coordinates around the tier. Once they're in place, their combined consciousness will create a psychic barrier that should hold the void for thousands of years. But it requires them to maintain the barrier permanently. Admiral Vextar, watching from the Federation command ship, could not understand what he was seeing. Those human ships are flying directly into the dimensional tier. They should be destroyed instantly. General Krickstall studied his sensor readings in amazement. The void creatures are retreating from the human ships. It's as if the humans are causing them pain just by being near them. What the aliens could not see was the battle being fought on a level beyond physical reality. The collective consciousness of the enhanced humans was engaged in direct combat with the intelligence that controlled the void swarm. It was a war of minds and wills, fought in dimensions that normal beings could not perceive. Lieutenant Nicole Brown felt her individual memories fading as she became part of the barrier. Her last clear thought was of the students she had taught before the war. She hoped they would grow up in a galaxy free from the void's hunger. Sergeant Tony Miller's final memory was of his daughter's laugh. Then he became part of something larger, a guardian consciousness that would watch over the dimensional tier for eternity. Captain Daniel Parker was the last to lose his individual identity. As the collective consciousness solidified around the tier, he sent one final message to Admiral Morrison. The barrier is holding, the void is contained. But Admiral, we won't be coming home. Dr. Garcia watched her instruments as the enhanced soldiers completed their transformation. The psychic barrier is stable. The dimensional tier is sealed. The enhanced humans have become a permanent part of the containment system. Morrison looked at the display showing the sealed dimensional tier, where once there had been a wound. In space, now there was a shimmering barrier of pure consciousness. 800 human souls had become the lock that would keep the void imprisoned. Status of remaining void forces? He asked, without their connection to the source dimension. The void creatures are dying. The corruption in occupied systems is beginning to fade. The war is over, Admiral. Across the galaxy, the news spread quickly. The void swarm was defeated. The dimensional tier was sealed. The galaxy was safe. But the cost of victory was something that no one had expected. The Federation species that had once called humans cowards now understood the truth. Humanity had not fled from the war. They had retreated to become something that could win it. The enhanced humans had sacrificed not just their lives, but their very humanity to save trillions of beings who had rejected them. Dr. Garcia returned to Earth with the surviving unenhanced humans, carrying the genetic templates and knowledge needed to rebuild their species. The hidden colony ships emerged from their hiding places, and humanity began the long process of reclaiming their place in the galaxy. But things were different now. The other species approached humans with a mixture of gratitude and fear. They had seen what humans were willing to become when pushed to their limits. The Federation invited humanity to rejoin the Alliance, this time as honored partners rather than junior members. Admiral Morrison stood in his office on Earth, looking out at the construction of new ships and colonies. Humanity was rebuilding, but they would never forget the 800 who had given everything. Sir, the Memorial Committee wants to know what inscription to put on the monument. His aide asked. Morrison thought about the enhanced soldiers who had become something beyond human to save the galaxy. Tell them to write this. Here we remember those who ceased to be human so that humanity could survive. They were called cowards, but they became heroes. They were labeled weak, but they became our strength. They are gone, but they watch over U.S. still, in the depths of space around the sealed dimensional tier. The collective consciousness of the enhanced humans maintained their eternal vigil. They were no longer individuals, no longer fully human, but they were content. They had saved the galaxy and their sacrifice would be remembered. The void pressed against their barrier, seeking escape, but the enhanced humans held firm. They would hold forever, ensuring that the darkness could never again threaten the living worlds of the galaxy. Humanity had been labeled cowards when they retreated from an impossible war, but in the end, they had become the last hope that saved them all. The price had been terrible, but the galaxy would endure because 800 humans had been willing to pay it. The stars shone brighter now, free from the shadow of the void. And in that light, the memory of humanity's greatest sacrifice would live forever.